Hello and welcome to Crossroads of Rockland History. I'm Clare Sheridan from the Historical Society of Rockland County. On today's program, I'll be speaking to Brad Conklin, Chair of the Historical Society of the Palisades Interstate Park Region. Before the creation of the vast interstate park system spanning New York and New Jersey, people lived and worked there in small villages and hamlets. The Historical Society of the Palisades Interstate Park Region is a grassroots nonprofit organization that works to preserve and share the history of the people who were displaced to make way for the park. The Historical Society of Rockland County is a nonprofit educational institution and principal repository for original documents and artifacts relating to Rockland County. Its headquarters are a 4-acre site featuring a history museum and the 1832 Jacob Blauvelt House located at 20 Zucker Road in New City, New York. It's listed on the National Register of Historic Places and a designated New York State Path Through History site. The Historical Society relies on financial support from people just like you. If you are interested in donating, becoming a member, or learning about volunteer opportunities, please visit our website at rocklandhistory.org. To begin today's episode, I'm going to read an excerpt from the foreword of Elizabeth Perk Stalter's excellent book entitled Doodletown: Hiking Through History in a Vanished Hamlet on the Hudson. The foreword was written by Mary Fisk, the granddaughter of Mary Harriman, and the commissioner of the Palisades Interstate Park Commission at the time of the publication of Stalter's book. This summary provides the perfect introduction for my conversation with Brad Conklin. On the New Jersey shore of the Hudson River, quarrying had been reducing the great cliffs of the Palisades to ruin since the 1850s. When the skyscraper era began, demand for broken stone for concrete increased. Explosions rocked the Hudson morning, noon, and night as companies dynamited to meet the need. By 1900, at Carpenter Brothers, one of the largest quarries, 12,000 cubic yards of rock was being blown down daily. Public outrage at this desecration, so visible and so audible from the great city across the river, finally led New York and New Jersey states to create an Interstate Park Commission. The unpaid commissioners began the work of surveying the New Jersey frontage, 147 parcels held by 112 different owners. And on Christmas Eve in 1900, the people of New York and New Jersey received the first part of a priceless gift. On that day, the blasting at Carpenter Brothers stopped forever. The acquisition of the Palisades for parkland had begun. With a combination of private gifts and public appropriations, the commissioners went on to negotiate prices of $200 to $500 an acre for the other properties, eventually securing 13.5 miles of cliffs and shorefront. As the quarries were shut down, workers were hired to improve the land and build paths to make the shoreline accessible for walkers. Meanwhile, a plan for the extension of the park northwards into the Hudson Highlands was beginning to take shape. Conservationists were concerned because quarrying continued to destroy the shoreline just above Nyack at Hook Mountain and in Haverstraw and Stony Point. Though the commission hoped to preserve more of the riverfront's rugged beauty, its original jurisdiction extended only as far north as Nyack. In 1906, its jurisdiction was extended to Stony Point, but the funds to acquire the quarries were lacking. 2 years later, public opinion was ignited again when the state began construction of a prison at Bear Mountain. Already a favorite spot for tourists, its fabulous scenery had been marred by guard towers, a blockhouse, and a huge stockade fence. Hundreds of convicts were clearing timber to build the prison. Public support for preserving the area for recreation crystallized. A major gift from Mary Harriman provided the impetus. She owned a 30,000-acre estate west of the Hudson and proposed to give 10,000 acres of forest land and $1 million to create a park. The gift was contingent on several conditions: locating the prison elsewhere, raising an additional $4 million in public and private funds to acquire more land and build roads, and extending the Palisades Interstate Park Commission's jurisdiction north to Newburgh and westward into the Ramapo Mountains. The offer stipulated that New Jersey pay its fair share, and that the private funds, $1.5 million, be raised within 16 days. The commissioners succeeded in raising the private monies ahead of the deadline, and government leaders in both states immediately agreed to meet all the other conditions. In 1910, the commission began to administer and add to Mary Harriman's gift. Today, Harriman State Park and contiguous Bear Mountain State Park comprise nearly 52,000 acres. And now I'd like to welcome my guest, Brad Conklin, to the program. Thanks so much for being here. Before we begin talking about the organization, take a moment and just tell our listeners a little bit about yourself.
I was always interested in the historical Harriman Park because we had family that lived up there, and many, many cousins that I found out later also living up there. I had always had the interest, and I would ask my dad about, where we came from, and he knew that we had come from behind St. John's in the Wilderness Church, and that there was a big family of Conklins that lived there, one being my great-grandfather, Len Conklin. I started researching it a little bit more, especially after we had seen a article in the Times Herald Record about this man that was doing Conklin history. We pursued it, and we actually went to see him. And he was an older man at the time, had been in World War II, and had jumped out of those airplanes on D-Day, but they didn't live in a modern setting. I'll put it that way.
Okay.
And they had a lot of cats. And so he told us all about this stuff, gave me a lot of papers. And also, a year later, I went to work at Orange and Rockland and met up with another cousin who I had known of, but never pursued him about anything because didn't know him that well. Mm-hmm. And so his name was Ken Conklin. And, well, he had tons of information. And actually, if I was working with him that day, we would get our work done in the morning. And if we had the time, he would go and show me all the old graveyards and stuff, not necessarily in the park, but all over the place. So my interest grew. Then he tells me about the reunion they have every year. I said, yeah, reunion of who? Oh, they come from all the hamlets that used to dot the park. So he said, come on up. So I think it was the next year or so, I did go to the reunion, and I think I've been to every one since.
And when did you go to your first reunion?
I think it was about 1991 or 2. Oh. And it was actually held at the St. John's in the Wilderness Barn, where I was familiar with it. Mm-hmm. And across the road where the cemetery is, was a lot of my earlier ancestors. And so I got more involved.
Okay.
And then working at Orange and Rockland, I met up with another man, Walt Luther, and he says to me about the reunion and that the organization they have. And I said, okay, well, that's good. But it wasn't until 2015 that I had gone to another reunion, and Walt was there. Now, I knew Walt pretty well by now, mm-hmm. because he actually was a cousin, and everyone up there was a cousin. I started going to these meeting places we have up in Tompkins Cove Library, and a lot of times he was the only one there. So we would sit and tell stories about work and people, and mm-hmm. and it would also refer to the mountain people, which, as I found out, they lived next door to where my ancestors lived. So, all right, now we've really had something going. And So I got involved around 2015 at the meeting place. Walter was getting a little older, as we all are. And he says, I don't know how many years I can do this. He was in his 8th year. So it was around 2020, I think it was. I said finally to him, okay, well, I'll do it for you. And that would make me chairman. I took over from then, and now I'm in my how manyth year? I've lost count. And I've tried to generate a little bit more activity within the group. One of the big things we do is to go up there to the abandoned cemeteries within Harriman Park and clean up the cemeteries. And they were in need of it. There was trees that had fallen down and into the cemetery area. Barberry, which is a curse, was all over the place. And we went in there, and in a few hours we made great headway. We are planning a Christmas membership dinner, and also I'm trying to get the Tompkins Cove Library to give us permission to hold a Christmas carol sing out on the in front of the library near Christmas, of course. We need people, not necessarily do they have to be related to a family member that lived up there, but that are wanting to know about history.
Yep.
After all, the whole thing got started over a prison.
Just take a moment and tell our listeners how it all came to be.
Okay. Back in the days of when the prison was to be established by the state, the Harrimans, who lived up in Arden, got wind of this and didn't like the idea of having a prison next to their holdings, be it 8 miles away, it didn't matter. So they got a hold of the state and told them not to have it. They didn't want a prison there. And because the Harrimans had the money and the influence, the state people listened to them. And Mrs. Harriman donated $1 million to the state for them to buy land adjoining the Bear Mountain piece to add to the park area. Now, they managed to get it all the way up to Arden. My goodness. And they wouldn't do it today, but they did it then. And even, as it got closer, that would be where Baileytown was, which is another cemetery that we try to keep up with. And so that's how it got started. And they pretty quickly started moving in on their eminent domain, as they called it, and buying up the woodland first, which was to the owners was no big loss because the brickyards were starting to fade out of existence, and they didn't need the cordwood that they had, although there was still some. So they sold that land, and then they started connecting the dots. So they came around to Johnsontown and started buying there. And as a lot of times they would give them a life right, and they would stay there until they passed away, or they're at least the owner of the property, in which cases was usually the father figure. And they accumulated more and more dots and connecting, and they came over to behind St. John's. And in 1930, my would be a great uncle Abraham lived there, and getting along in years, they gave him a life right, and he stayed there till 1946, and then he passed away, and then the family had to get out.
How many towns or hamlets were impacted by the PIPC land acquisition?
I'll give you the biggest ones first. Okay. But Johnsontown and Sandy Fields, Baileytown. A lot of them wouldn't even be called a town, but they were just an area.
Mm-hmm.
Queensboro, and then you head up into where they had the ski slope there, the silver mine,
Mm-hmm.
and bought those properties, continued on up through Baileytown, connecting to the Arden property. And you had sporadic settlements in Cedar Pond and Pitt Town and all those mostly family groupings that lived in an area there.
And these were municipalities with schools and other infrastructure, right?
Yeah, Johnsontown had a school, and they had a Methodist church. Sandyfields had a school, which my mother went to in second grade. Yeah, they were all over. Doodletown was, quite a established area.
Mm-hmm.
But that wasn't bought by Harriman. That was bought by Bear Mountain. And they were going to put in a cross-country ski slope for them, or some kind of a path.
Mm-hmm.
And they said that they needed that property, but they didn't. But that's another story. So that was some of the bigger places.
Where did the people go?
In the case of Johnsontown, which was the largest community, I'll call it, or hamlet, and a lot of them went to the Sloatsburg, Suffern area, and the Sandyfields people more or less moved into the back part of Stony Point. All the pits, they kind of just hung on there. They're going to have to be removed by force if they had to be.
Were there some families that just said, we're not going?
Oh, sure. Yeah, they hung right on to the end. Even up at Lake Welch, where it is today, which is Sandyfields, the one family that lived on what they called Baisley Island. It wasn't an island then. It was just a high point in the fields. They hung on to the very, very end. And I guess when the patriarch of the family passed away, and the young kids just didn't want the fight to keep on going. Mm-hmm. And it wound up costing them more money to defend against the eminent domain than it did to, they were going to lose, and they did. Yeah. But they moved out, and a lot of them live in the Stony Point area, and many, many of them are cousins.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. Which I found out through the years. They're all over the place.
Well, and that is part of the reason for the community involvement, right?
We don't want them forgotten, and that's what we strive to do.
You are planning one of these reunions, right?
Yes, that's actually started with a different group, and as they got older, they couldn't just keep up with it, and transferred it to our group, mm-hmm. of which a lot of them were members anyway. And so it just transitioned into our group for the last 3 or 4 years, I guess. We'll get maybe about 40 people to come and visit us. And we have old census records, and we have, what we do have is now the collection of Robert Wallace's, who took an awful lot of pictures and had maps and deeds, and we just got it here recently, and my goodness, it takes you a half an hour just to look at all the pictures in one album. Wow. And so we haven't got through them all yet, but what I have, I started with known areas that my family lived in, and up in Kanawaki and all that stuff.
And your organization's collection is housed at the Tompkins Cove Public Library. Can you talk about when that's open?
We're open most Saturdays, unless it's a holiday weekend. And this coming year, we will close for the month, mm-hmm. in July, but that's how many months away? And so we open at 1 o'clock. We have to wait for the library to open us up. And we open at 1 and we close at 4. But quite frankly, if nobody shows up after 3 o'clock, we look at each other and say, well, next week's another day, and do it that way. So it's Saturdays, 1 through 4, actual hours. And we're up on the second floor of Tompkins Cove Library, which is 419 Route 9W in Tompkins Cove.
What's the most common question that people ask when they come to the library?
The most common question would be, so what's your organization about? You know, a lot of people, they just don't know that there was villages, hamlets, up through the mountains there that people lived in, worked in, farmed in, had families in. And they had, there was a lot of people that made their livings right there on the grounds, but they also had worked in the brick industry, roundabout, say as my great-grandfather, Len Conklin, who had teams of horses, and all winter long, they would go through the mountains, and he would buy a certain acreage of property and clear it and store it at his home there on Gate Hill Road. And then in spring, when the brickyards opened, they start hauling all this wood down to the brickyards. Brickyards used vast amounts of wood to heat the bricks until they really got settled into using coal, and it was cheap enough for them to do it, and the railroad had sidings for them. They did that.
That people really think about that area, the Harriman Park and the Palisades Interstate Park. I mean, they think of it as just purely recreational, like whether you're hiking or, and so to come upon, in some cases a cemetery, in some cases it could be a foundation of a structure. It's surprising to most people, I would think.
Well, the most surprising thing, now that you just touched on it, is they think that those lakes were there forever. They were not.
Right.
We also have gone up into Pine Meadow, and we put up a sign where Ramsey Conklin, who was the last inhabitant of Pine Meadow, where he lived, and because some pictures that were taken years ago, we know exactly where that cabin was because of the walnut tree that was planted close by that had a unique limb on it. And so we knew. And we had about 6 or 7 people in there that time because it needed the brush had to be cleared out.
Yeah.
And so we got our sign up in there. Now I need somebody to go back up in there and tell me what it looks like. Jeez, it's getting harder every year even for me to trace back in there.
Another amazing thing is the fact that you have placed historical markers up there to help people understand what the history is. Those need to be maintained. So I totally understand. It's difficult. I mean, some of the hiking is very difficult.
Yeah. Well, one thing we did this year was when they were building Lake Welch Beach, they were infringing upon the outskirts of one of the cemeteries up there. And so some of the families that were connected were not against moving them or as to be not trotted on by the general public. And they moved them down to Stony Point at Mount Rest. And they purchased a piece of the property up there, and they moved them down. And there they've been for years, 40, 60 years now. And I said to our board, I think there should be something there, recognition that what the story is of how these graves came to be.
Yeah.
So we put a sign up this year.
I'm sure there's tons of things you want to do. How do you decide what is on your docket each year to do your community outreach?
Well, it's a good question. Us older timers are not as ambitious as maybe a younger person that they just have fresher ideas.
Mm-hmm.
And so I've been asking around, hey, how would you like to be the my successor? And I don't get much sympathy. But in the last year here, I have been invited to the Rotary, and I have been invited to one of the senior citizens groups to give my little talk
Mm-hmm.
about Harriman Park.
Great.
And how it came to be and who lived there and where'd they go. So these people, if they didn't live there, they don't know. They just don't know. They just think that's the way it was always, which it wasn't.
Could you just tell our listeners how they can find out more if they're interested?
I go on Facebook and I put in little messages about when we're going to be open, and if there's a particular subject, I might touch upon that. But we have our little pamphlets that we hand out. Some of the delis and restaurants where local people go.
Mm-hmm.
And unfortunately, we don't get down to the Sloatsburg area, which is really full of ancestors.
Yeah.
And, to get into them. But that's something one of them youngsters can take that little ride one day and stop around at some of the establishments. This year, as I mentioned earlier, we'll have the collection of Robert Wallace. And he was quite the history keeper.
Mm-hmm.
And he wrote stuff. He had the deeds and maps he drew, and of course the where those people lived and houses.
That's
and
right.
As we've mentioned, my cousin, or what would he be? He would be a great grandfather.
Okay.
He did live up along the Lake Kanawaki with Little Long Pond, as it was called then,
Mm-hmm.
and became much longer. And he lived there, and all of them had such big families. So they all spread out till they're up in New England now, and I keep in touch whatever I can with these people and let them know that we're still there. And I just tell them that the door's always open.
Oh, that's great. That's nice.
Come on in.
Well, Brad, thank you so much for taking the time to speak to me today.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Well, that's all the time we have for today. The Historical Society of the Palisades Interstate Park Region is located in the Tompkins Cove Public Library at 419 North Liberty Drive, Tompkins Cove, New York, 10986. They are open Saturdays from 1 p.m. to 4 p.m. You can learn more about them through their Facebook group, and you can find that by going to Facebook and searching Historical Society of the Palisades Interstate Park Region. On September 6th, the organization will host a reunion of the hamlets that were once part of now Harriman State Park. They plan to share new bequests, including those from Joan Brooks, as well as the collection of Robert Wallace. I'm pleased to announce that the Historical Society of Rockland County will be hosting a guided hike in Harriman State Park on September 27th. This moderately difficult hike will take hikers to the Letchworth Reservoirs. And after the hike, participants have the option to enjoy Oktoberfest at Cruckers. So watch our website for more details. That hike will take place on September 27th. Keep in mind that all the information we discussed will be available at rocklandhistory.org. And I hope you'll tune in to the next Crossroads of Rockland History, which will begin streaming on Monday, September 15th. The Historical Society of Rockland County has a new and improved website. Check it out to learn all about the events and programs on tap, including our annual fundraising luncheon, which will be taking place on September 7th. We'll be honoring Wynn Perry, the Friends of the Mount Moore Cemetery, and Trudy Album. Please check our website if you'd like to attend. We'd love to have you. Our web address again is rocklandhistory.org. Of course, you can call us at 845-634-9629. That's rocklandhistory.org or 845-634-9629. I'm also pleased to announce that on August 24th, we will be having a fun family day at the Historical Society. It's from 1 p.m. to 4 p.m. on Sunday, August 24th. It's going to be a lot of fun for families and people of all ages. Another great way to keep up with what we're doing at the Historical Society is follow us on Facebook. You can also find us on Instagram and Threads, and you can also read our blog on Tumblr. And don't forget that past episodes of this program are archived at rocklandhistory.org, and they are also found on all major podcast platforms. I'm Clare Sheridan. Thanks for listening to Crossroads of Rockland History.